Krishna. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, and welcome to today's session. How are you doing? I pray that all is well with you and your families at this time. So, by the laws of nature, as we are assessing life through the system of understanding nature and what happens to us as human beings, we see that many things are predictable. And because some things are predictable, we use this template across the board of life. Then we develop the mindset that all of life is predictable. And due to that, when nature becomes unpredictable, like we're experiencing now through the coronavirus, then it catches us off guard and we don't know how to handle it because we always lived with the idea that life is predictable. This puts us in a very disempowering situation as we try to make sense of our own lives and the events of our own lives that happen to us day to day. So as we're studying Bhagavad Gita, we sing that this has also happened to Arjuna, the soldier. And under the counsel of Krishna, he's trying to understand then, how do I act? How do I handle the situation when it is unpredictable to me? So we're starting that lesson now. So we've just completed the first lesson of the Bhagavad Gita, that you are not the body, you are the soul. And now as the soul, how do you behave? How do you act? How do you work within this world? Now that's the starting of the second lesson which Krishna is starting with today. So let's see this, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse number 31. Swadharmam api chaveksya navikampitum aharasi dharam yaddi yudhyakshreyonyat kshatriyasya na vidyate. Translation: considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya. So the second lesson for Arjuna has begun as Krishna is trying to teach him how to act. What should one do under these circumstances? So he's brought in the concept of duty. And what is duty? And we're going to see and explore this in a very deep, practical way. What is duty? Because especially here in India, duty means a lot of things. People have different concepts and ideas of duty. So let's hear directly from Krishna what is duty and what is the best duty for Arjuna. So he starts by telling Arjuna that in considering your specific duty. So immediately we get an understanding that duty is a broad thing. And there is specific duty and then there is the general duty. So Krishna is telling Arjuna in this case, you have something specific. And what is that? Arjuna is a soldier. And as a soldier, not everybody has that particular duty. He has that particular duty. So there are certain behaviors that is expected by one who's empowered with the license to kill in order to protect Dharma, in order to protect the innocent. So this immediately brings up the idea that can everybody do this killing idea? It's not meant for everyone because you have to have a certain nature. You have to have a certain nature in order to do this. And you have to be connected to that duty in order to take a life. You can't just take a life like that if you're not connected to that higher duty. Because by your mental makeup, you won't be able to live with yourself with that level of guilt. So how do you perform such a specific duty? This is what Krishna is telling Arjuna here today. You should know that there is no better engagement for you. So he's giving us the second point about duty, that it is an engagement. It is an action. It is an action, but it's an action inspired or motivated by something higher. It is not an action just is coming from the mind or a response to the material environment. No, it's coming from a higher level. It's authentic. It's coming from some higher place. Therefore, to be able to do this, it empowers you to do that. So we see Krishna has just given a master class in the physiology, the study of the body and the soul, and now is giving a master class in psychology, how to understand one's duty by understanding one's nature. It will give you an inclination as to what is your proclivity in life. What is that according to your nature that you're most comfortable doing, while connecting that to a higher purpose, your duty. So we see today's verse stems from a verse that was spoken way back in 2.7. Karpanya dosha prahatasvabhava prichanti tvam dharma samudacheta yakshreya nistita bruhitan me shishasteham shadimam tvam prapanam. So today we see this word shreyo, and in 2.7 we also saw this word yakshreyo nistita bruhitan me. What is the highest goal, or what is the duty that I should do? So when Arjuna asked that question in 2.7, now in 2.31 it has been answered. That Krishna is saying your shreyo, or the duty that you should perform, is as a Kshatriya and defend the innocent, protect Dharma. So he goes on, then fighting on religious principles, and so there is no need for hesitation. So hesitation is a result of an unsteady mind. A mind that's constantly flickering. There's no stability in your mind. If you see that in your life you hesitate a lot, this immediately can give you an idea of your mind, that your mind is in that state. The same thing that it accepted here, immediately it will reject it here, because it cannot decide, indecision. Because by the nature of the mind, it doesn't decide, it only provides options. So if you're looking for stability on the level of the mind, it's not the mechanism to do that. The intelligence does that. It discriminates. That means it makes a choice. It makes a decision. But by the nature of the mind, if it's very strong, then it can overpower the intelligence. So immediately so many levels of our self we're beginning to understand very early on in the Bhagavad Gita. That we have a mind, and that our mind is restless, and in order to control the mind, it needs the discriminating power of the intelligence, which is connected to duty. If it's not connected to duty, then the mind by its nature will create hesitation, and you cannot live life by hesitation. If you're constantly hesitating, if you're constantly changing your plans and changing your ideas, that means you're living life at the level of the mind. So Krishna uses this word kampana or kamputum in today's verse, where he's describing this hesitation. Kampana actually means like shivering. So kampana at the level of the body is like shivering. So it shows that at the level of the mind is unsteady, therefore it's reflecting at the level of the body as shivering, because you're undecided, because it's not a stable state, it's a state of indecision. So on one moment you choose it, the next moment you reject it, you're not sure, indecisive. So how do you make a genuine choice? You have to consult authority, you have to consult something higher, and then by the guidance of that authority, if you just do it, then there's no more hesitation. This is why the intervention of the spiritual teacher is so vital to spiritual practice. Because if we're practicing at the level of the mind, then there are certain things that we'll do sometimes and many things we won't do. But by the guidance of the spiritual teacher, we feel obliged to carry out the instruction even though we may accept it or not. So this gives us a platform of stability, although we're not sure what is the result. But it's a much more stable platform than the mind, because what the mind is saying today is good, tomorrow it will say, nah, it's not good. And the next day it say, okay, maybe we should try it, but. You know that but? South African Indians are famous for starting their sentences with but. So it's always keeping you in neutral. And you know if you're in neutral, you can't go anywhere. You're neither going forward nor backwards. And the problem with that is life doesn't work with neutral. If you don't make a decision about life, it will force you in a certain direction. So there's no neutral gear in life. So by assessing ourselves, we see that the mind is always going to confuse us. The mind is always going to give us the confusing answer. Therefore, we have to develop resolve. Resolve means you are taking the guidance of something higher and you are just doing it whether you like it or not. Whether the mind says it's comfortable or not. You are just doing it because you can see the Shreya, the ultimate goal. You can see that this is good for me. Therefore, I will do it. Therefore, I will put in the hours. Therefore, I will sacrifice. That whole concept is called duty. And if we assess this as a principle of life, we can see that we cannot overcome any difficulty in life unless we have resolve. Unless you've resolved that this is what I'm going to do, come hell or high water, I'm just going to do this. Unless you connect it at that level, your mind is always going to pull you back to that indecisive state. And that is very disempowering.
Under the guidance of a spiritual master, he can still be drawn to this perfectional stage by working. Karma with an overcoat of devotional service becomes karma yoga. This means whatever work one does or one wants to do, one can do that work. All one needs to do is to offer the fruits to the Lord. One simply does what Lord wants one to do, without any personal preferences of likes and dislikes. So, even if one cannot directly practice the regulative principles, they can try to help such work. Every endeavor requires land, capital, organization, and labor. Just as in business, one requires a place to stay, some capital to use, some labor, and some organization to expand. So the same is required. The only difference is that in materialism, one works for sense gratification. The same work, however, can be performed for the satisfaction of Krishna, and that is spiritual activity. There are various fields of activity, and one should be interested in such activities. If one cannot sacrifice the results of his activities, the same person can still sacrifice some percentage to propagate. This voluntary service will help one to rise to a higher state of love for God, whereupon one becomes perfect. Thus, even the poorest man can engage in the service of Krishna. These are some of the examples of how one can engage in working.
So Prabhupada starts with the purport. He says here, out of the 4 orders of social administration, the second order for the matter of good administration is called Kshatriya. So we see these 4 orders of society. That society is naturally divided into the worker class, the Sudra, the Kshatriya class, the administrator, the Vaishya class, the mercantile, and the Brahmana class, the intelligentsia. So by nature, you'll fit into one of these 4 categories. And by that, one can determine then what is one's duty. Because at this level, if you try to execute life according to somebody else's duty, you'll find that you cannot be consistent. You'll end up into trouble. So the first lesson in duty is understand your nature. Once you understand your nature, then you'll understand what I should do, and then you'll understand how I should act. So he goes on, Kshat means hurt. One who gives protection from harm is called Kshatriya. Trayate, to give protection. The Kshatriyas are trained for killing in the forest. A Kshatriya would go into the forest and challenge a tiger face to face and fight with the tiger with his sword. When the tiger was killed, it would be offered the royal order of cremation. This system has been followed even up to present day by the Kshatriya kings of Jaipur state.
धीरे धीरे बढ़ाता रहो, धीरे धीरे बस रोक लो, धीरे धीरे बढ़ाओ, धीरे धीरे बढ़ाओ, धीरे धीरे बढ़ाओ, वेरी गुड, चलो धीरे धीरे बढ़ाओ, that's why I'm just moving the vehicle. You said stop, I said no, हटाओ आगे, आ रहे हो रोड, धीरे धीरे बढ़ाओ, धीरे धीरे बढ़ाओ. Don't worry, no. Now we are safe. We must need to make a distance with him. बस यहीं रोक लो मोड़ पे.
Beautiful.
बंद मत करियो, बंद मत करियो. मैं बताऊँ बस. बंद मत करियो. चलाओ. बस रोक लो. चढ़ाई पर रोको ऊपर. बस रोको.
Please more distance.
रोको. चलाओ.
So it's describing a specific nature, right? Nobody can just go out and tackle tigers. Why? Because there's no tigers left. No, it's not because of that. It's because of our nature. You need a certain nature, a nature of chivalry, a nature. Unless you have that nature, you won't be able to do what Kshatriyas do. So the first level of duty, understand your nature. Understand what is your nature. And Krishna describes this in Gita. Chaturvarnam maya shishtam guna karma swabhavacha. That by nature there are these four social systems of human society. But how are they determined? Guna karma swabhavacha, not janma karma swabhavacha. The caste system that India has been blasphemed for is based on the misunderstanding that Krishna has created caste among society. No, he has said guna karma swabhavaja. Guna means by qualities, not janma karma swabhavaja, by birth. It's not by janma, it is by guna karma swabhavaja. That means these qualities will come by nature, by qualities. It's not determined by your birth. Krishna says guna karma swabhavaja. He never says janma karma swabhavaja. He never says it's by your birth. He says it's by your qualities. The Kshatriyas are specifically trained for challenging and killing because religious violence is sometimes a necessary factor. Therefore, Kshatriyas are never meant for accepting directly the order of sannyas or renunciation. This will be a big problem because if a Kshatriya becomes a sannyasi or a renunciate, and if he asks you for something and you don't give it, then big problem. Because by his nature, he will act and respond in a violent way. And Arjuna is saying, I want to run away from the battlefield and go and beg. So by nature, if he goes and begs, as a sannyasi begs alms, and somebody refuses him, then what happens? So therefore, Kshatriyas were not allowed to take sannyas or the renounced ascetic order of life.